A warm welcome to everyone. We're very excited to welcome you to the 5th edition of our Coffee and Good Company series. My name is Sarah Garcia. I'm part of the B-Lab Europe team based in Amsterdam. And on behalf of the whole team, we'd like to thank you for being with us today in this early morning. So just to provide a bit of context for those of you who are joining us for the first time, early this year, B-Lab Europe, together with 60 companies from the B Corp community, responded to the European consultation on stakeholder governance. And in this response, our proposal was that every company registered in the EU must consider the interests of all of its stakeholders in its governance. And so it's a loaded proposal, right? Lots of things to unpack there. And so some of the questions we really want to address with our guests during this series is, what does stakeholder governance really mean in practice? What does it mean to run a company that places people and planet at the center of its decision making? And what are some of the challenges and opportunities that companies are facing along that journey? So today we're really excited to welcome Christoffer Immanuel, co-founder and CEO of Danish B Corp Organic Basics. Organic Basics has been an outspoken advocate for the need for change within the fashion industry. It's using its own business model and supply chain as an example of how business can be a force for good in an industry which the company itself has called a dirty bastard. So thank you so much, Christoffer, for joining us today.
Thanks. And thanks for the warm welcome. I'm very pleased to join. Feel very privileged to be invited to this. Yeah, I'm excited to have a good coffee with you, Sarah.
Thank you. Likewise, Christoffer. So just to get started, and for those in the audience who are not yet familiar with Organic Basics, where does the story of starting a fashion company which places people and planet at the core of its business model begin?
So it begins with a long friendship and an urge to build something. I think build something that could hopefully change things for good. And so we weren't really sure what that was going to be. So I've been doing my own business since I was around 18 years old. But in 2014, a good friend contacted my brother, who's a photographer, and said, "Hey, I want to do this organic men's underwear on subscription." And I was living with my brother, who was going to take the photos, and I was like, "Wow, that sounds crazy. I want to hear more about that. Who would come up with such an idea?" Because I had never heard about a business model like that before. And so I spoke to Mads, and he told me about the idea and about how he had an insight that the fashion industry was like the second or third. I think there's some questions to what number on that list, but one of the most polluting industries in the world. And so we talked about how uncool it was that something like clothing was so high up on the list. I mean, we could understand it if it was education or if it was healthcare or it was the food industry, something very vital to humanity. But clothing seemed awkward because I mean, then we started kind of researching on it, and when we look back, people had been fixing their clothes, making their clothes, and they would have the same pants for half a lifetime, and you would sew it yourself, and you would go you would really appreciate those pants, and you would wear it to your very last day. And then in about, I think 30-40 years ago, someone invented the idea of fast fashion and treating clothing it's something that should be changed more often than we used to, and that kind of accelerated. So we thought, hey, maybe, I mean, we've been doing clothes right for a lot of years, and then in a very short period, we kind of misunderstood how clothes should be seen in how we use it. So 40 years out of in our total span here on the planet using clothes seemed like just a tiny small correction. So we thought, hey, maybe that could be our part of trying to get that back on track and finding a good way to use clothes again. And so I had another business with my friend Alex, whom I've known since the first day of school. We sat next to each other So we're like, okay, we have no fashion experience, we have no experience in the industry, and so really like no dots were connected. And when we tried to present it to people, I mean, I didn't hear anyone say, that makes sense, you guys should go do that. But we did it anyway, and we kind of like, we knew something was wrong in the industry, and we wanted to create a brand and an organization with purpose and meaning, to create something that we wanted to wear ourselves. Mess is a fisherman. He loves going fishing, and so over the past course years, he's seen like it's. I don't know if he's losing his skills or it's just getting increasingly difficult to get fish here in Denmark. But maybe there's like some loss of biodiversity overall. Alex is a rock climber, and so he loves traveling to Sweden and going rock climbing. And we have very few mountains in Denmark, so he needs to travel a tiny bit to find some. And I was a Boy Scout for 12 years, and like to think that's where I actually had my education, like rather than business school or anywhere else. So we want to create something that we want to wear ourselves, and like we were more interested in how it's made and what's the footprint of that cloth, rather than is it the new fancy color, does it have the right print. And so I think we connected a lot with what Patagonia does, and sort of like, okay, what does like a digital native direct to consumer version of Patagonia looks like from Scandinavia? And I've always find it weird that not more companies are like copying the business model of Patagonia. Like they even wrote a book about their core insights, but it seems like very few big corporates manage to actually follow what they do. But so we're built on friendly fabrics, and every day that keeps developing. So we started out focusing organic cotton. Now we have more different types of fabrics. And so when we say friendly, we kind of we have a carbon footprint measurement on all of our products, so we kind of know what friendly looks like and how to develop friendly. Responsible and transparent factories. And so I mean, when you said stakeholder governance, I was like, yeah, someone told me that word in business school, and then I kind of forgot it. But I think we do like translate it into human language. Like the people that we work with is super important to us. And that is both the people working here at the office, but also the people we work with in the factories or in the manufacturing facilities in Portugal, in Italy, and in Turkey, where we produce. And then the reason why we wanted to do the whole business ourselves is so we could kind of modulate the business model and do the products ourselves. So we kind of knew that if we're going to make this change, we couldn't just be an agency, or like we needed to really get our hands deep into the business model. And so we've kind of built around sustainability, and sustainability is always at the core. That's what drives us to innovate and develop. And so just for people on this call, so to me, sustainability is giving more than you take away from a system. And I think people is like, oh, but sustainability is just a process, but really it isn't. Like sustainability, like if you have a system and you take away more than you put in, then that system is not sustainable. But if you put in more than you take, then it will grow and it will be a sustainable system. And I think to do that with a consumer goods product like ours is super difficult. And so we'll probably spend 100 years like trying to figure out how to make garments sustainable, because we are using a lot of earth resources to make our products. Luckily, renewable resources, but it's a complex system, and it's built up by many stakeholders. So yeah, I don't know if that's a short story, but
No.
at least it's some words on what we do.
No, absolutely. And thanks so much for sharing. I'd love to build on something you just said that really resonated with us, which is we're built around sustainability. Because we often hear the question, yes, building around sustainability, putting sustainability at the core, or prioritizing people and planet is a great idea, but how do I organize my company and my management structure to really move that agenda forward and make sure it's embedded within the DNA of my company? So I'm super curious to hear how Organic Basics is organized, and how you've structured your management, your board, and your operations to basically protect the mission that you're trying to accomplish, and to ensure that the interests of the different stakeholders that you're working with across the supply chain, your employees, et cetera, how those voices are heard.
Yeah, that's a super good question. And I think just for reference, so we're a company that's only 6 years old. So like in human terms, that's, I think, called a toddler. So we're still really learning to walk and like still finding our way. But I would say we, to answer your question, the way that we work with the best way we work with that is find people that cares just as much as we do. Like find colleagues that cares more about how we work than like what profit we make. And so I think we try to hire like-minded people. That's the best way to do it, like people that cares. But I think on paper we're starting to kind of like test structures, systems that kind of allows us to do that. And so this year we bought out our biggest investor to be able to kind of win back our independence. And so I think they're actually also a B Corp. So they were really good guys. We're just it wasn't the right fit, and so we made a buyout. But it's like for us to do that, to set our own board, to not have like fixed board members, was actually an important part, because that allowed us to build a board that focuses on more than just kind of profit, which per definition usually investor does, because I mean they put in money, they expect more to come out of it, so that they have like one focus on the profit piece, and they can focus on different things, but they don't measure on it. So per definition, they don't focus on it. But we're talking about value-driven business, and so I think that's how we built the board right now. So we just restructured the board, and we made sure to find someone that had very deep experience in each P. So one in the people P, one in the planet P, and one in the profit P. And then we're still figuring out whether it's like how do we make sure that people P is not just representing the people P, but that we are able to have a conversation where we take different stands on different Ps, so that we don't kind of like box each other in and say, hey, you're the profit P when we're talking about the planet, please don't get involved. Because I think that's the challenge, is like boxing each other in. But I think like when we're really empowering each other, that's when it's good. And then our own we call it the leadership team. In Danish, we have like a word for the management team being the leadership team, but I'm not sure it's, yeah. But the leadership team, we have just built it out with a chief impact officer and a chief people officer. So I think it's to kind of like design the system and the conversations you're having, and to figure out where a decision is made in your business. And so we allow for more business operation stuff to happen between different teams. But when it comes to kind of like value-driven decisions, we like to help scale that in the leadership team. But we are a very autonomous team, and I mean, people here are super independent, and sometimes that is very challenging for a young leader like me, because I feel like each time I want to make a change, it's like, yeah, cool, maybe, but let's see if we will actually follow that. So it's kind of, I mean, it's beautiful and it's also difficult. But people here are really independent, and they're they kind of like, they have their own purpose for working here, and we have very few people having quit working at Organic Basics, because it becomes a lifestyle. We have a very international environment here, so people are also friends outside of work, and that's also like a responsibility for us to take, not to kind of take advantage of that, but really use it in a positive way, that people are connected to this work. And so when it's tough, it can really also overwork them at a level that is not healthy. So that's something we're trying to stay really sensitive to. And when it's good, it's also super fun, because people are colleagues or friends. And especially in a time of lockdown, we've really tried to like cater to that people should connect with each other like they used to before.
And I'm really nice to touch upon employees as key stakeholders. I think that sometimes in these big kind of meta conversations around planet and communities and inequality, sometimes those closest to you get forgotten. So it's really I'm happy to be able to bring in employees as a key stakeholder that you mentioned. And I think it's a really nice bridge to, you've spoken about the stakeholders that are near you, but I'm also curious to understand, for companies like Organic Basics, working with the cotton and textile supply chains, some of your key stakeholders, be it, cotton farmers or manufacturers, can often be very far away. These are long and complex supply chains. So what needs to be in place to make sure that, Organic Basics and you guys in the Copenhagen office can really understand the needs and the interests and the risks of your stakeholders that are, not so close by?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I think it really helped us. Like from the beginning, we didn't know how this industry worked. So basically, like we went on a plane and we asked our first manufacturing agent called Fidel, like, hey, we want to see how the whole supply chain works. It's like, okay, we can go to the factory, and like, no, we want to see like from the very beginning, like meet the farmer. It's like, okay, that's weird. I've never done that for any of my clients before. And so like, okay, well, we want to see how the whole process works. And so we did like the whole tour. I think it took 2 or 3 days. And we have a very local production, so everything is like in the Izmir province of Turkey. And so we went there. We spoke to the different stakeholders in the different levels of manufacturing process, and we had someone translate, because I mean, there's even though Turkish people are really good at English, like these are also farmers that maybe didn't have a long education, so they know a lot about the soil, and we wanted to know more about the soil. So it was kind of like important that we kind of understood all of their important knowledge from this, from their business of growing cotton, and so I think it's really being curious for us, like how does it work and how can we make it better. And so one of the things we're trying to figure out now is that most cotton in Turkey is sold on auctions. And so how do you trace something that like, so you know where it comes from, but then it goes into an auction where it's not easy to trace, and then it goes out and you're kind of like, okay, what happened in that little black box? So last year we started a project with WWF to support farmers that wanted to transition to regenerative organic cotton. And so this will allow us to connect directly with the farmers. And I would say we're trying not to be super price sensitive in the way that we want to make sure that the farmers get what they need, and that we're building a sustainable relationship. And I think that's in our industry something that is not so common. It's like people are really trying to go push hard on prices. And I mean, there's just so much happening in the area of cotton production. So I think we saw earlier that a lot of the Chinese cotton production was kind of exited because it was maybe questioned how they were producing this cotton. And so then a lot of companies kind of shifted into buying more Turkish cotton, and then there was a shortage of the Turkish cotton. And so, I mean, so there's so much happening here, and we want to understand closer, build closer relationships to these farmers. And I think that goes for all the people that we work with, like trying to understand what does their everyday life look like, and how can we work together in a way that's best for both of us. So we try to be really honest about the kind of prices we're able to pay, and we hope that they will support us in like building a long-term relationship. And then there's a difficulty of culture, because like in Denmark we have a very honest, transparent approach, and like if that doesn't mix with the cultures that we're trying to deal with. So I think in Turkey they're traditionally great tradesmen, and so they like we have experienced that like sometimes we've not been taken advantage of, but maybe we should know more about how to go into relationships. And I would say, being a young company now, we have people here that are more experienced working with different cultures. But I think as 3 young guys in 2015, that had no clue what we're doing. I mean, we were the easiest people to fool. So it's about, I mean, we try to present with honesty, and most often we meet people that does the same. So building trustful relationships, and then also being interested in how they work, seeing how we can optimize it. So really kind of taking ownership for their operations as well.
Yeah. So I'm hearing things just like genuine curiosity, maybe also humility, that, you know, it's a complex, kind of sometimes opaque supply chain. And you mentioned, of course, the partnership with WWF, right? Just kind of the acknowledgement that there's organizations out there that are, you know, maybe closer connected to the issues at hand. So I'd love to kind of explore that a little bit more with you. And if I understand correctly, Organic Basics also runs the Organic Basics Fund,
Yeah.
which is focused on tackling issues of climate and biodiversity and vulnerable communities all over the world. So I'm curious to talk to kind of unpack that with you and understand how these partnerships, I mean, you mentioned WWF, but if there are more, how they've helped you connect with the right issues and the right stakeholders.
Yeah. So I think we found it kind of difficult to connect with people that cared around the same thing as we do, that weren't corporate companies. So to find these passionate young climate activists or people really being passionate about a cause that we wanted to or would be able to support was kind of actually difficult in the beginning. So we connected with 1% for the Planet. And so from there, we started learning about, okay, how do we support grassroots activism in these different areas? Yeah, we created this fund to kind of like create a platform that people could engage with and like be open about, hey, this is something that we want to do. And so it's a really good platform to connect with people with a cause that we would like to support. And so I think we're still trying to figure out. I mean, we have shared a lot of insights with the Patagonia team, who's been doing this for a long time. And so I think they're more careful working with big organizations like WWF. But for us, it was like a good learning to see how we could support this regenerative transition in Turkey. And so I think we work with it on two ways. So we're both like romanticized in terms of keeping diversity. So being an outdoor person, I see that we're losing a lot of biodiversity right now. So we want to try to support grassroots who are like trying to preserve this. And then at the same time, we want to make sure that we limit our negative impact on the climate change. And so these are like kind of the 2 foots, and then the fund represents us supporting preservation of biodiversity and the rest that the fund stands for.
Super. Just with an eye on the time, Christoffer, there are some questions coming in from the audience, which we might be able to cover in the last few minutes. So one question from Christian Hassan is, do you see a future for organic cotton? He says it's resource intensive and has a long, transportation line. Talking about alternatives, what's in your mind when it comes to this question?
So it's good input, and I think the challenge is that if 9 billion people thinks that something is a good idea, it's probably like not a good idea in overall. So like if we're all going to wear cotton clothes, then it's going to be too much cotton production. So I think that's like, how can we diversify the fibers that we use so it isn't creating a single crop focus? And I think that's something. So I mean, I don't see cotton as a bad crop, but like too much cotton is not good. So I think it's about being smart about the fibers that we use for different purposes in clothing, and then finding a way that we can kind of limit the impact. And so I would say that one of the positive things that we're seeing with regenerative organic cotton is its capabilities to sequester carbon. So it's a different way of growing cotton. But it's still in like a pilot project. So we're still figuring out like how much carbon is being captured and how is that whole system going to work for the farmer as well. And so this is not our production, it's the farmer. So we're trying to support experimenting with this. Yeah.
Awesome.
I don't know if this was a kind of a political answer, not trying to answer his question, but I tried the best I could.
Thanks so much for that. Christoffer, one thing I'd like to maybe end with is you and I have discussed, what success looks like and the growth of organic basics over the last year. So I was wondering if we could just end on your vision of growth and what it means to be successful as a fashion company, which is built on sustainability. Just to end, just to understand, what's in the future, what lies in the future for your company.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I mean, so we did see a huge demand for like shopping online, and probably also a lot of people connected with their values much more in this lockdown period. And so we did see a lot of like high growth in the COVID under COVID, sorry. So we're trying to get back to like healthy, steady growth, and really like just finding back to the good pace that we had before this big external factor came in and like derooted our path. And so yeah, we're trying to build not for growth but for lasting. And so we're trying to figure out what that looks like. And I mean, as I started with, like, we're only 6 years old. So there's so many things we don't know yet. We don't know how to do, and so we're in the lucky position that a lot of really smart people wants to work here, and so we're trying to scale the operations and scale the team with good people who are passionate about what we're passionate about, so we can make sustainable clothing accessible for more people on this planet. Yeah, sorry, I was digging into all of the good questions that was in the comment field.
We'll absolutely get the audience's questions to Christoffer and get the answers for you. Thank you so much to the audience. And before we go, I wanted to just inform you that we're officially launching our Interdependence Coalition next week, Wednesday, at the B Corp Climate Summit. So welcoming everyone to join that. The link is in the chat. And just to thank you so much, Christoffer, for being with us today, for sharing the challenges, but also the super exciting opportunities that you're facing in building organic basics. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sarah. It was a pleasure having a coffee with you and everyone else on this call.
Likewise, and see you soon. Thank you very much.
Yeah, hopefully. Bye.
The audience, bye-bye.